Number 5339. And the earth made gatherings in the 7 years of plenty. This signifies the first states when truths are multiplied in series, as is evident from the signification of 7 years, namely the first states. For the 7 years of plenty came first, and the 7 years of famine came after. Years are states, see Numbers. And from the signification of plenty, namely the multiplication of truth. The earth made signifies that this multiplication took place in the natural, for the earth here is the natural. And from the signification of gatherings, namely series. In regard to the series signified by gatherings, the case is this. With the man who is being reformed, general truths are first introduced, then the particulars of the generals, and finally the details of the particulars. The particulars are arranged under the generals, and the details under the particulars. These arrangements or settings in order are signified in the word by bundles, here by handfuls or gatherings, and they are nothing but the series in which truths, when multiplied, are arranged or set in order. With the regenerate, these series are according to the arrangement of the communities in the heavens. But with those who are not and cannot be regenerated, they are according to the arrangement of the communities in the hells. Hence the man who is in evil and thence in falsity is a hell in miniature, and the man who is in good and thence in truth is a heaven in miniature. But in regard to these series, by the Lord's divine mercy, more will be said elsewhere. Number 5340. And he gathered together all the food of the 7 years. This signifies the preservation of truth adjoined to good multiplied during the first times, as is evident from the signification of gathering together as here being to preserve. For he gathered it together and put it in the cities and in the midst, and by this is signified that he stored it up in the interiors, thus that he preserved it, for it came into use in the years of famine. And from the signification of food, namely all that by which the internal man is nourished. That this is good and truth is evident from the correspondence of the earthly food by which the outward man is nourished, with the spiritual food by which the inward man is nourished. Here, therefore, it is truth adjoined to good, for this is what is preserved and stored up in the interiors. By the 7 years are signified the first states when truths are multiplied. From this it is plain that the preservation of truth adjoined to good, multiplied during the first times, is signified by he gathered together all the food of the 7 years. It is said the preservation of truth adjoined to good, but as few know what truth adjoined to good is, and still less how and when truth is adjoined to good, something must be said about it. Truth is conjoined with good when a man feels delight in doing good to the neighbor for the sake of what is good and true, and not for the sake of self or the world. When a man is in this affection, the truths he hears or reads or thinks are conjoined with good, as is usually noticeable from the affection of truth for the sake of that end. Number 5341. That were in the land of Egypt. This signifies that was in the natural, as is evident from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely the natural mind. Thus the natural. Number 5342. And put the food in the cities. This signifies that he stored it up in the interiors, namely truths adjoined to good, as is evident from the signification here of putting, namely storing up, from the signification of food, namely truth adjoined to good, and from the signification of cities, namely the interiors of the natural mind. That truths adjoined to good are stored up in the interiors of the natural mind, and there preserved for use in after life, especially for use in temptations during man's regeneration, is a secret known to few at this day, and therefore something must be said about it. For by the 7 years of plenty are signified the truths first multiplied, and by the corn being put in the cities and in the midst is signified that these truths adjoined to good are stored up in man's interiors, and by the 7 years of famine and by the sustenance at that time from the gatherings is signified a state of regeneration through truths adjoined to good, stored up in the interiors. This is a mystery. From earliest infancy to the beginning of childhood, man is being introduced by the Lord into heaven, and indeed among celestial angels by whom he is kept in a state of innocence, a state in which, as is known, infants are up to the beginning of childhood. When the age of childhood begins, the child gradually puts off the state of innocence, though he is still kept in a state of charity by means of the affection of mutual charity towards those like himself, which state with many continues up to youth, and meanwhile he is among spiritual angels. Then, because he begins to think from himself and to act accordingly, he can no longer be kept in charity as before, for he then calls forth inherited evils, by which he suffers himself to be led. When he arrives at this state, the goods of charity and innocence that he had previously received are banished according to the degree in which he thinks evils and confirms them by act, or rather they are not banished, but are withdrawn by the Lord towards the interiors, and there stored up. But as he does not yet know truths, the goods of innocence and charity he had received in the 2 preceding states have not yet been qualified, for truths give quality to good, and good gives essence to truths. Wherefore from this age he assimilates truths by instruction, and especially by means of his own thoughts and confirmations therefrom. In so far therefore as he is then in the affection of good, so far truths are conjoined in him by the Lord, and are stored up for use. This state is signified by the 7 years of plenty. It is these truths adjoined to good that in the proper sense are called remains. In so far, therefore, as the man suffers himself to be regenerated, so far the remains serve for use. For so far a supply from them is drawn forth by the Lord, and is sent back into the natural, in order to produce a correspondence of the exteriors with the interiors, or of what is natural with what is spiritual. And this is effected in the state signified by the 7 years of famine. Such is this mystery. The member of the Church at this day believes that anyone, no matter what his life is, may of mercy be received into heaven, and there enjoy eternal bliss. For he supposes admission to be all that is necessary. But he is much mistaken, for no one can be admitted and received into heaven unless he has received spiritual life. And no one can receive spiritual life unless he is being regenerated. And no one can be regenerated except through the good of life conjoined with the truth of doctrine. From this he has spiritual life. That no one can enter heaven unless he has received spiritual life through regeneration, the Lord plainly declares in John. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born anew, he cannot see the kingdom of God. And then he says, Verily, verily, I say to thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Water is the truth of doctrine, and Spirit is the good of life. No one enters by baptism, but baptism is significative of that regeneration which the member of the Church ought always to keep in mind. Number 5343. The food of the field of the city. This signifies things that belong and are suitable to them, namely truths adjoined to good in the interiors, as is evident from the signification of food, namely truths adjoined to good. The truths that belong and are suitable to the interiors are signified by the food of the field of the city, because the field belonged to the city and surrounded it. Surrounding things signify in the internal sense things suitable and pertinent. Wherefore also it is immediately said, That which was round about it put he in the midst thereof. The reason why surrounding things signify those that belong and are suitable is that all truths joined to good are arranged in series. And the series are such that in the midst or inmost of each series there is truth joined to good, and round about this are the truths belonging and suitable thereto, and so on in order to the very outermost, where the series terminates. The series themselves are also similarly arranged in relation to one another, but are varied according to changes of state. Such arrangements of truths joined to good are rendered visible in the other life. For in the light of heaven, in which are intelligence and wisdom, such things can be presented to view, though not in the light of the world, nor in the light of heaven with the man whose interiors are not open, and yet they may be acknowledged by him from rational insight, and in this way be rationally seen in the light of heaven. These arrangements originate from those of the angelic communities in heaven, for as these are arranged, so are the series of truths joined to good arranged in the regenerate, for the latter correspond to the former. Number 5344. That which was round about it he put in the midst thereof. This signifies that it stored up in the interiors of the interior natural the things previously in the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of round about, namely the things outside, thus those in the exterior natural, and from the signification of the midst, namely the things within, thus those in the interior natural. In the midst thereof, or of the city, denotes in the interiors of the interior natural, because the interiors are signified by a city. The interior things of the interior natural are those in it called spiritual, and are from the light of heaven, which light illumines the things therein which are from the light of the world, and are properly called natural. In the spiritual things therein are stored up truths adjoined to good. The spiritual things therein are those which correspond to the angelic communities in the second heaven, with which heaven man communicates by means of remains. This is the heaven that is opened when man is being regenerated, and is closed when he refuses to be regenerated. For remains, or truths and goods stored up in the interiors, are nothing else than correspondences with the communities of that heaven. Number 5345. And Joseph heaped up corn as the sand of the sea, exceeding much. This signifies the multiplying of truth from good, as is evident from the signification of heaping up as here being to multiply, and from the signification of corn, namely truth in will and act, the multiplying of which, when compared with the sand of the sea, signifies that it is from good, and here from the good of the celestial of the spiritual by influx. For truth in the interiors is never multiplied from any other source than good. The multiplying of the truth which is not from good is not the multiplying of truth, because it is not truth, however much in outward form it may appear to be truth. It is a sort of image with no life in it, and being dead, does not come near the truth. For truth to be truth in man must live from good, that is, through good from the Lord, and when it so lives, multiplying may be predicated of it in the spiritual sense. That the multiplying of truth is solely from good may be seen from the fact that nothing can be multiplied except from something resembling a marriage, and truth cannot enter into marriage with anything but good. If with anything else, it is not marriage but adultery. What therefore is multiplied from marriage is legitimate, thus is truth. But what is multiplied from adultery is not legitimate, but spurious, thus is not truth. Number 5346. Until he ceased to number, because it was without number. This signifies such as had in it the celestial from the divine, as is evident from the fact that the truth in which is the celestial from the divine is without limit, and thus without number. Only the Lord, who is here represented by Joseph, had such truth when he was in the world, and the glorification of his natural is here treated of in the supreme sense. Number 5347, verses 50 to 52. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine came, whom Asenath the daughter of Potipherah, priest of On, bare to him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And to Joseph were born 2 sons, signifies good and truth therefrom. Before the year of famine came, signifies that were born through the natural, whom Asenath the daughter of Potipherah, priest of On, bare to him, signifies that were born from the marriage. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, signifies a new will in the natural and its character. For God hath made me forget all my toil, signifies removal after temptations. And all my father's house signifies the removal of hereditary evils. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, signifies a new understanding in the natural and its character. For God hath made me fruitful, signifies the consequent multiplication of truth from good. In the land of my affliction, signifies where temptations were suffered. Number 5348. And to Joseph were born 2 sons. This signifies good and truth therefrom, namely from the influx of the celestial of the spiritual into the natural, as is evident from the signification of being born, namely being reborn, thus the birth of truth from good, or of faith from charity. The births spoken of in the word are spiritual births. And from the signification of sons, here Manasseh and Ephraim, namely good and truth, see below. For Manasseh signifies the will of the new natural, and Ephraim its understanding. Or what is the same thing, Manasseh signifies the good of the new natural, because good is predicated of the will, and Ephraim signifies its truth, because truth is predicated of the understanding. In other passages also, where we read of 2 sons being born, one signifies good and the other truth, as for example Esau and Jacob. That good is signified by Esau may be seen at Numbers, and truth by Jacob. So likewise with the 2 sons of Judah by Tamar, Perez and Zerah. And so here with Manasseh and Ephraim. Their birth is now treated of, because in what immediately precedes was described the influx of the celestial of the spiritual into the natural, and hence its rebirth, which is effected solely by means of good and truth. 5349. Before the year of famine came. This signifies that were born through the natural, as is evident from the signification of before the year of famine came, namely, while the state of the multiplication of truth from good lasted, which state is signified by the years of plenty, and thus before the state of desolation signified by the years of famine. As in the former state truth from good was multiplied in the natural, and thus good and truth were born to the celestial of the spiritual through the natural. Therefore this consequence is signified by the words, before the year of famine came. Number 5350. Whom Asenath the daughter of Potipherah, priest of On, bare to him. This signifies that were born from the marriage, as is evident from what was said above. Number 5351. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. This signifies a new will in the natural and its character, as is evident from the representation of Manasseh in the word, namely spiritual good in the natural, and thus a new will, see below. This name also involves the very character of this good, or of this new will. That the name involves this character may be seen from the names given to others also, the character of whom is at the same time indicated, as is the name Manasseh in the words, For God hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. For in this way is described the character signified by Manasseh. Moreover, when it is said, He called the name, there is also signified that the name itself contains the character. For the name and calling the name signifies the character. The reason why the firstborn, who is named Manasseh, signifies spiritual good in the natural, or the new will therein, is that good is actually the firstborn in the church, or in the man who becomes a church, whereas truth is not the firstborn, although it appears as if it were. As may also be seen from the fact that in man the will proceeds. For man's willing is the beginning of his life, and his understanding comes after, and conjoins itself in accordance with his willing. What proceeds from the will is called good in those who by regeneration have received from the Lord a new will, but evil in those who have not desired to receive it. And what proceeds from the understanding is called truth in the regenerate, but falsity in the unregenerate. Yet as man's will is not discernible except through the understanding, for the understanding is the will in form or the will adapted to the sense, it is therefore supposed that the truth which proceeds from the understanding is the firstborn, and yet it is not except in appearance, for the reason given. Hence arose the old controversy as to whether the truth of faith or the good of charity is the firstborn of the church. Those who decided from the appearance said that truth is the firstborn, but those who did not decide from the appearance acknowledged that good is the firstborn. Hence also at the present day faith is made the first and very essential of the church, and charity is made secondary and not essential. But men have wandered much farther from the truth than the ancients, by declaring that faith alone saves. In the church by faith is meant all the truth of doctrine, and by charity all the good of life. They indeed call charity and its works the fruits of faith. But who believes that fruits do anything for salvation when it is believed that a man may be saved by faith at the last hour of his life, whatever his previous life has been, and when in their teaching they even separate works which are of charity from faith, saying that faith alone saves without good works, or that works which are of the life do nothing for salvation. Oh, what a faith! And oh, what a church! They adore dead faith and reject living faith. And yet faith without charity is as a body without a soul, and we know that a body without a soul is removed from sight and cast forth because of its stench. So it is with faith without charity in the other life. All those who have been in faith so-called without charity are in hell, while all who have been in charity are in heaven. For everyone's life remains, but not his doctrine, except in so far as it is derived from his life. That Manasseh signifies the new will in the natural, or what is the same, spiritual good there, cannot be so well shown from other passages of the word as that Ephraim signifies the new understanding in the natural or spiritual truth therein. Nevertheless, the signification of Manasseh can be inferred from that of Ephraim. For in the word where two are thus mentioned, by the one is signified good, and by the other truth. And therefore Manasseh signifies spiritual good in the natural, which good is of the new will, as will be seen in what presently follows about Ephraim. Number 5352. For God hath made me forget all my toil. This signifies removal after temptations, as is evident from the signification of forgetting, namely, removal, and from the signification of toil, namely, combats, thus temptations. Hence it follows that the words, God hath made me forget all my toil, signify removal after temptations, that is, the removal of the evils which have caused pain. That this is signified is plain also from what is related of Joseph in the land of Canaan among his brethren, and afterwards in Egypt. In the land of Canaan that he was cast into a pit and sold, in Egypt that he served and was kept in prison for some years. That temptations are signified by these events has already been shown, and it is plain that these are meant by his toil. Number 5353. And all my father's house. This signifies the removal of hereditary evils, as is evident from the signification of father's house, namely here hereditary evils. For by a house in the internal sense is signified a man, and indeed his mind, either rational or natural, but specifically the will therein, consequently good or evil, because these are predicated of the will. And therefore by father's house here are signified hereditary evils. The character signified by Manasseh is contained in these and the immediately preceding words. In the original language, Manasseh means forgetfulness. Thus, in the internal sense, the removal of evils, both actual and hereditary. For when these are removed, a new will arises. For the new will comes into existence through the influx of good from the Lord. The influx of good from the Lord with man is continuous, but there are evils both actual and hereditary that hinder and obstruct its reception, and therefore when these are removed, a new will comes into existence. This is very evident in the case of those who are in misfortune, misery, and illness. For as in these the loves of self and of the world, from which come all evils, are removed, the man thinks rightly about God and the neighbor, and also wishes his neighbor well. It is similar in temptations, which are spiritual pains, and hence inward miseries and despairings. By these, chiefly, are evils removed, and after they have been removed, heavenly good flows in from the Lord, whereby a new will is formed in the natural, and this new will is Manasseh in the representative sense. Number 5354. And the name of the second called he Ephraim. And this signifies a new understanding in the natural and its character, as is evident from the signification of a name and calling a name, namely, the character, and from the representation of Ephraim, namely, the understanding in the natural, see below. But first must be told what is meant by the new understanding and the new will signified by Ephraim and Manasseh. In the Church it is indeed known that man must be born again, that is, must be regenerated, in order that he may enter the kingdom of God. For the Lord has plainly declared this in John chapter 3, verses 3 and 5. But what it is to be born again is known only to a few, because few know what good and evil are, for they do not know what charity towards the neighbor is. If they knew this, they would also know what good is, and from good what evil is. For all is good which comes from sincere charity towards the neighbor. But no one can be in this good from himself, because it is the celestial itself which flows in from the Lord. This celestial flows in continually, but evils and falsities stand in the way of its being received. And therefore, in order that it may be received, it is necessary for man to remove evils, and as far as he is able, falsities also, and thus dispose himself to receive the influx. When, after evils have been removed, the man receives the influx, he at the same time receives a new will and a new understanding. And from the new will he feels delight in doing good to the neighbor from no selfish end. And from the new understanding he perceives delight in learning what is good and true for its own sake and for the sake of life. Inasmuch as this new understanding and new will come into existence through influx from the Lord, the man who has been regenerated acknowledges and believes that the good and truth with which he is affected are not from himself but from the Lord, and also that whatever is from himself or of his own is nothing but evil. All this shows what it is to be born again, and also what the new will and new understanding are. But regeneration, through which come the new understanding and the new will, is not accomplished in a moment, but goes on from earliest infancy even to the close of life, and afterwards in the other life to eternity, and this by divine means, innumerable and ineffable. For man of himself is nothing but evil, which continually exhales as from a furnace, and continually endeavours to destroy the nascent good. The removal of such evil and the implanting of good in its place can only be effected by divine means numberless and ineffable, operating throughout the whole course of life. Of these divine means scarcely any are known at the present day, for the reason that man does not suffer himself to be regenerated, nor does he believe regeneration to be anything, because he does not believe in a life after death. The process of regeneration, which includes ineffable things, makes up the main part of angelic wisdom, and is of such a nature that it cannot be fully exhausted by any angel to eternity. Hence, this is the chief subject dealt with in the internal sense of the word. That Ephraim is the new understanding in the natural is plain from very many passages in the Word, especially in the prophet Hosea, which treats much of Ephraim, and in which we read as follows: I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me, in that thou, O Ephraim, hast wholly committed whoredom, Israel is defiled. Israel and Ephraim shall go to ruin by their iniquity, Judah shall also go to ruin with them. Ephraim shall become a desolation in the day of rebuke. And I am as a moth to Ephraim, and as a boring worm to the house of Judah. And Ephraim saw his sickness, and Judah his wound. And Ephraim went to the Assyrian, and sent to King Jareb, and this one could not heal you. Again, in the same prophet, when I healed Israel, then was the iniquity of Ephraim revealed, and the evils of Samaria. For they have wrought a lie, and a thief cometh, and a troop maketh a raid. And Ephraim was like a silly dove without heart. They called Egypt, they went to Assyria. When they shall go, I will spread my net over them. Again, Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the nations as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. When they went up to Assyria, a wild ass alone. Ephraim winneth him loves with a harlot's hire. Israel shall not dwell in the land of Jehovah, and Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and they shall eat what is unclean in Assyria. Ephraim hath compassed me about with a lie, and the house of Israel with deceit. And Judah yet ruleth with God, and is faithful with the saints. Ephraim feedeth on wind, and followeth after the east wind. Every day he multiplieth a lie and wasting, and they make a covenant with the Assyrian, and oil is carried down into Egypt, besides many other passages in the same prophet concerning Ephraim. See Numbers. In all these passages, by Ephraim is meant the intellectual of the church, by Israel its spiritual, and by Judah its celestial. And it is because the intellectual of the church is signified by Ephraim that it is so often said of him that he goes away into Egypt and into Assyria. For by Egypt are signified external knowledges, and by Assyria reasonings from these, both being predicated of the understanding. And that Egypt signifies external knowledges may be seen above, and also that Assyria signifies reason and reasoning. See Numbers. In like manner, in the following passages, Ephraim signifies the understanding of the church. Exult greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh to thee. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and I will cut off the battle bow. But he shall speak peace to the nations, and his dominion shall be from sea to sea, and from the river even to the ends of the earth. I will bend Judah for me, I will fill Ephraim with the bow, and I will stir up thy sons, O Zion, with thy sons, O Javan. This is said of the coming of the Lord and of the church of the Gentiles. To cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem denotes to cut off all the understanding of the church. To fill Ephraim with the bow denotes to give a new understanding. That a chariot signifies doctrine may be seen above, a horse the understanding, and a bow also doctrine. For doctrine depends on the understanding. For what is understood is believed, the understanding of the doctrine determining the character of the faith. Hence also the sons of Ephraim are called shooters with the bow in David. The sons of Ephraim, who were armed and shooters with the bow, turned back in the day of battle. In Ezekiel, Son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it, for Judah and for the sons of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph the stick of Ephraim, and of all the house of Israel his companions. Afterwards join them for thee, one to another, into one stick, that the two may become one in my hand. Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph that is in the hands of Ephraim, and of the tribes of Israel his companions, and will add those who are upon it with the stick of Judah, and I will make them one stick, that they may be one in my hand. Here also by Judah is meant the celestial of the church, by Israel its spiritual, and by Ephraim its intellectual. That these are made one through the good of charity is signified by one stick being made out of two. That wood is the good of charity, and consequently the good of works, may be seen above. In Jeremiah, there shall be a day that the watchmen from the mountain of Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, let us go up to Zion, unto Jehovah our God. I will be a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. In the same, I have surely heard Ephraim be moaning himself, Thou hast chastised me, and I was chastised, as a calf unaccustomed. Turn thou me, that I may be turned. Is not Ephraim a precious son to me? Is he not a child of delights? For after I have spoken against him, I will surely remember him again. In the same, I will bring back Israel to his habitation, that he may feed on Carmel and Bashan, and his soul shall be satisfied on the mountain of Ephraim and in Gilead. In Isaiah, Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, and to the fading flower, and to the glory of his adornment. which are upon the head of the valley of the fat ones, that are troubled with wine. In these passages also, Ephraim signifies the understanding of the church. The understanding of the church is the understanding the members of the church have of truths and goods, that is, of the doctrinals of faith and charity, thus their notion, concept, or idea about them. Truth itself is the spiritual of the church, and good is its celestial. But truth and good are understood differently by different men. Such therefore as is the understanding of truth, such is the truth with everyone. It is similar with the understanding of good. What the will of the church is that is signified by Manasseh may be known from its understanding, which is Ephraim. It is with the will of the church as with its understanding, namely, that it varies with each person. Manasseh signifies this will in Isaiah. In the wrath of Jehovah Zebaoth, the land is darkened, and the people is become like the food of fire. No man shall spare his brother. They shall eat every man the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, they are one against Judah. Here every man eating the flesh of his own arm, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, denotes that the will of the member of the church will be against his understanding, and his understanding against his will. In David, God hath spoken by his holiness. I will exult, I will divide Shechem, and mete out the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine, and Ephraim is the strength of my head. Again, give ear, O shepherd of Israel, thou that leadest Joseph like a flock, thou that sittest upon the cherubim, shine forth. Before Ephraim and Benjamin and Manasseh, stir up thy might. Here also Ephraim denotes the understanding of the church, and Manasseh its will. The same is plain also from the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh by Jacob before his death, and also from Jacob's accepting Ephraim in place of Reuben, and Manasseh in place of Simeon. For by Reuben was represented the understanding of the church, or faith in the understanding and in doctrine, and by Simeon faith in act or obedience and will to do the truth, from which and by which is charity, and thus truth in act, which is the good of the new will. The reason why Jacob, then Israel, blessed Ephraim in preference to Manasseh, by putting his right hand upon the former and his left upon the latter, was the same that Jacob had for diverting to himself the birthright of Esau, and the same as in the case of Perez and Zerah, the sons of Judah, by Tamar, when Zerah, who was the firstborn, came forth after Perez. This reason was that the truth of faith, which is of the understanding, is apparently in the first place during man's regeneration, and then the good of charity, which is of the will, is apparently in the second place. Yet good is actually in the first place, and is manifestly so when the man has been regenerated. Number 5355. For God hath made me fruitful. This signifies the consequent multiplication of truth from good, as is evident from the signification of making fruitful, namely multiplication, that is, of truth from good. For fruitfulness is predicated of good, and multiplication of truth. Hence in the original language Ephraim was named from fruitfulness, and its character is contained in the words, For God hath made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. This character is that truth from good was multiplied in the natural after the temptations suffered there. What the multiplication of truth from good is shall be briefly stated. When man is in good, that is, in love towards the neighbor, he is also in the love of truth. Consequently, in so far as he is in this good, so far he is affected by truth. For good is in truth as the soul in its body. As therefore good multiplies truth, so it propagates itself. And if it is the good of sincere charity, it propagates itself in truth and by truth indefinitely. For there is no limit to good or to truth. The infinite is in all things in general and in particular, because they are all from the infinite. But still the indefinite can never in any way reach the infinite, because there is no ratio between the finite and the infinite. In the Church today there is rarely any multiplication of truth, because at this day there is no good of sincere charity. It is believed to be sufficient to know the dogmas of faith of the Church in which the man is born, and to confirm them by various means. But one who is in the good of sincere charity, and thence in the affection of truth, is not content with this, but desires to be enlightened from the Word as to what truth is, and to see the truth before he confirms it. Moreover, he sees it from good, because the perception of truth is from good. For the Lord is in good, and gives the perception. When a man receives truth in this way, it increases indefinitely. In this respect, it is like a little seed which grows into a tree, and produces other little seeds, which in turn produce a garden, and so on. Number 5356. In the land of my affliction. This signifies where temptations were suffered, as is evident from the signification of the land, here the land of Egypt, namely the natural, and from the signification of affliction, namely temptation. From this it is plain that by in the land of my affliction is signified in the natural where temptations were suffered, and consequently that truth from good was multiplied therein. As this fruitfulness or multiplication of truth from good is effected chiefly by means of temptations, it was thus expressed. The reasons why this fruitfulness is effected chiefly by means of temptations are these. Temptations remove the loves of self and of the world, thus evils. And on the removal of these the affection of good and truth flows in from the Lord. Temptations also qualify the perception of good and truth by means of the opposite things which evil spirits then infuse. And it is by perceiving opposites that relatives are obtained, from which comes all quality. For no one knows what is good without also knowing what is not good, nor what is true without knowing what is not true. Temptations also confirm goods and truths, for the man then fights against evils and falsities, and by conquering comes into a stronger affirmative. Moreover, by means of temptations, evils and falsities are subdued, so that they no longer venture to rise up. And in this way evils and falsities are rejected to the sides, and there hang, but drooping downwards, while goods and truths are in the midst, and according to the zeal of affection are lifted upwards, thus to heaven and towards the Lord, by whom they are lifted up. Number 5357, verses 53 to 57. And the 7 years of plenty that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. And there was famine in all the lands, and in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And all the land of Egypt was famished, and the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all Egypt, Go unto Joseph, what he saith unto you, do. And the famine was over all the face of the land. And Joseph opened all the storehouses, and sold to Egypt. And the famine was sore in the land of Egypt. And all the earth came into Egypt to buy to Joseph, because the famine was sore in all the earth. And the 7 years of plenty were ended, signifies after the states of the multiplication of truth. That was in the land of Egypt, signifies in the natural. And the 7 years of famine began to come, signifies the following states of desolation. As Joseph had said, signifies as had been foreseen by the celestial of the spiritual. And there was famine in all the lands, signifies desolation everywhere in the natural. And in all the land of Egypt there was bread, signifies remains in consequence of truths from good having been multiplied. And all the land of Egypt was famished, signifies desolation in both naturals. And the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread, signifies the need of good for truth. And Pharaoh said to all Egypt, signifies perception. Go unto Joseph, signifies that it was from the celestial of the spiritual. What he saith to you, do, signifies provided there is obedience. And the famine was over all the face of the land, signifies that there was desolation even to despair. And Joseph opened all the storehouses, signifies communication from remains. And sold to Egypt, signifies appropriation. And the famine was sore in the land of Egypt, signifies increasing severity. And all the earth came into Egypt, signifies that truths and goods were brought into the external knowledges of the church. To buy signifies appropriation therefrom. To Joseph signifies where the celestial of the spiritual was. Because the famine was sore in all the earth, signifies that everywhere, except there, was there desolation in the natural. Number 5358. And the 7 years of plenty were ended. This signifies after the states of the multiplication of truth, as is evident from what was explained above, where similar words occur. Number 5359. That was in the land of Egypt. This signifies in the natural, as is evident from the signification of the land of Egypt, namely the natural. Number 5360. And the 7 years of famine began to come. This signifies the following states of desolation, as is evident from the signification of years, namely states, and from the signification of famine, namely a lack of the knowledges of truth and good, consequently desolation. A famine denotes such a lack or desolation, because celestial and spiritual food are nothing else than good and truth. Angels and spirits are nourished by this, and they hunger for it when hungry, and thirst for it when thirsty. And therefore also material food corresponds thereto, as bread to celestial love, and wine to spiritual love, as well as everything that pertains to bread or food, and to wine or drink. When therefore there is a lack of such things, there is a famine, and in the word this is called desolation and vastation. Desolation when truths fail, and vastation when goods fail. This desolation and vastation is treated of in many passages of the word, and is there described by the desolation of the earth, of kingdoms, of cities, of nations, and of peoples, and is also termed a pouring out, a cutting off, a consummation, a desert, and a void. And the state itself is called the great day of Jehovah, the day of his wrath and vengeance, a day of darkness and thick darkness, of cloud and of obscurity, a day of visitation, also the day when the earth shall perish, thus the last day and the day of judgment. And because men have not understood the internal sense of the word, they have hitherto supposed that it meant a day when the earth will perish, and that then for the first time will there be a resurrection and a judgment, not being aware that by a day in such passages is signified a state, and by the earth the church, and thus by a day when the earth will perish, a state when the church will come to its end. Therefore, when this perishing is described in the word, a new earth is also described, by which is meant a new church. In regard to the new earth and new heaven, see what is said above. That last state of a church which precedes the state of a new church is properly meant and described in the word by vastation and desolation. By the same words is described also the state that precedes man's regeneration, which state is here signified by the 7 years of famine. Number 5361. As Joseph had said. This signifies as had been foreseen by the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of to say in the historical parts of the word, namely to perceive, as often shown above. And therefore when predicated of the Lord, who here is Joseph, to perceive from himself, thus to foresee. And from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual. Number 5362. And there was famine in all the lands. This signifies desolation everywhere in the natural, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely desolation, and from the signification of all lands, namely everywhere in the natural. That land denotes the natural mind, thus the natural may also be seen above. Number 5363. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. This signifies remains in consequence of truths from good having been multiplied, as is evident from the fact that by the bread in all the land of Egypt is meant the corn gathered in the 7 years of plenty and laid up in the cities, by which are signified the remains stored up in the interiors of the natural mind, as has frequently been stated and shown above. Hence, bread in all the land of Egypt signifies the remains in consequence of truths from good having been multiplied. That remains are here meant by the bread in the land of Egypt is evident also from the fact that the years of famine had already begun, in which the land of Egypt suffered famine equally with the other lands, except that it had stores laid up which the other lands had not. And therefore these words now follow, and all the land of Egypt was famished. Number 5364. And all the land of Egypt was famished. This signifies desolation in both naturals, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely desolation, and from the signification of all the land, namely both naturals. Number 5365. And the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread. This signifies the need of good for truth, as is evident from the signification of crying, namely the act of a person in grief and mourning, and thus in need, from the signification of people, namely truth, from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural, and from the signification of bread, namely the celestial of love, thus good. From this it follows that by the people cried unto Pharaoh for bread is signified the need in the natural of good for truth. This meaning indeed appears remote from the historic sense of the letter, but when they who are in the internal sense understand by crying, by people, by Pharaoh, and by bread, nothing else than what has been said, it follows that this meaning results therefrom. The case in regard to the need of good for truth must be explained. Truth has need of good, and good has need of truth. And when truth has need of good, truth is conjoined with good. And when good has need of truth, good is conjoined with truth. For the reciprocal conjunction of good and truth, namely of truth with good and of good with truth, is the heavenly marriage. In the early stages of man's regeneration, truth is multiplied, but not good. And as truth has then no good with which to be conjoined, it is withdrawn and stored up in the interiors of the natural mind, that it may be called forth thence according to the increasings of good. In this state truth is in need of good, and moreover conjunction of truth with good takes place according to the inflow of good into the natural. But still no fruitfulness is affected by this conjunction. But when man has been regenerated, then good increases. And as it increases, it is in need of truth, and also procures truth for itself with which it may be conjoined. And thereupon there is a conjunction of good with truth. When this takes place, truth is made fruitful from good, and good from truth. That this is the case is entirely unknown in the world, but it is very well known in heaven. And yet, were it understood in the world, not only by knowledge but also by perception, what celestial love or love to the Lord is, and what spiritual love or charity towards the neighbor is, it would also be known what good is, for all good is of these loves. And moreover, it would be known that good desires truth, and truth good, and that they are conjoined according to the desire and its character. This might be plain from the fact that when truth is thought of, the good adjoined to it is felt at the same time, and when good is stirred, the truth adjoined to it is seen at the same time, in both cases with affection, desire, delight, or holy aspiration. And from this the character of the conjunction might be known. But as it is not known from any inward sensation or perception what good is, such things cannot be understood. For that about which nothing is known is not understood, even when it comes into view. And as it is not known that spiritual good is charity towards the neighbor, therefore it is a matter of dispute in the world, especially among the learned, what is the highest good. And scarcely anyone has maintained that it is that delight, satisfaction, blessedness, and happiness which is perceived from mutual love, devoid of any selfish or worldly end, and which makes heaven itself. From this also it is plain that in the world at this day it is not at all known what spiritual good is, and still less that good and truth form a marriage together, and that heaven is in this marriage, and that those who are in it are in wisdom and intelligence, and have joys and delights with unlimited and inexpressible variety, not one of which is known by the world, nor is its existence even recognized and believed. Yet it is heaven itself, or that very heavenly joy, about which so much is said in the Church. Number 5366. And Pharaoh said to all Egypt. This signifies perception, as is evident from the signification of to say in the historical parts of the word, namely to perceive, from the representation of Pharaoh, namely the natural in general, and from the signification of all Egypt, namely both naturals. From this it is plain that by Pharaoh said to all Egypt is signified perception in both naturals, in general and in particular. Number 5367. Go unto Joseph. This signifies that it was from the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual. To go unto him signifies that it was from him, that is, the good for truth, which is signified by the bread for which the people cried unto Pharaoh. Number 5368. What he saith to you, do. This signifies provided there is obedience, as is evident from the signification of to do what anyone says, namely to obey. By this is signified that good is adjoined to truth in the natural, provided the natural applies itself and obeys. Something must be said about the natural applying itself and obeying. Those who are in worldly things only, and still more those who are in bodily things, and even still more those who are in earthly ones, cannot understand what is meant by saying that the natural ought to apply itself and obey. They suppose that there is only one thing that acts in man, and therefore that there is not one thing in him to command and another to obey. and yet it is the internal man that should command, and the external that should obey, and that does obey when the man regards not the world as the end, but heaven, and not self, but the neighbor. Consequently, when he regards bodily and worldly things as means, and not as the end, and he so regards them when he loves his neighbor more than himself, and the things of heaven more than those of the world. When this is the case, the natural obeys. The natural is the same as the external man. Number 5369. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. This signifies when there was desolation even to despair, as is evident from the signification of famine, namely desolation, and from the signification of the earth, namely the natural. When famine is said to be over all the face of this, despair is signified, because desolation is then everywhere. For the height and extremity of desolation is despair. Number 5370. And Joseph opened all the storehouses. This signifies communication from remains, as is evident from the signification of to open here, namely to communicate. All in which are the repositories in which the corn was stored, and by which are signified remains, as has been repeatedly shown above. That remains are goods and truths hidden by the Lord in the interiors may be seen above. Number 5371. And sold to Egypt. This signifies appropriation, as is evident from the signification of to sell, namely to appropriate to anyone. For what is sold becomes his who buys it. That selling and buying signify appropriation will be seen below. Number 5372. And the famine was sore in the land of Egypt. This signifies increasing severity, that is, of the desolation, as is evident from the signification of famine and of the land of Egypt, namely, desolation in the natural, the increasing severity of which is signified by its being sore. Number 5373. And all the earth came into Egypt. This signifies that goods and truths were brought into the external knowledges of the Church, as is evident from the signification of the earth. The signification of earth or land in the word is various. In general, it signifies the Church, and hence the things belonging to the Church, which are goods and truths. And because it signifies the Church, it signifies also the member of the Church, for he is the Church in particular. And because it signifies the member of the Church, it signifies that which is the man in him, namely the mind. Hence it is that the land of Egypt frequently above signified the natural mind. In this passage, however, the land of Egypt is not meant, but the earth in general, consequently the things of the Church, which are goods and truths. That the signification of land or earth as various may be seen above, and that in general it signifies the Church, see Numbers. That by all the earth coming to Egypt is signified that goods and truths were brought into external knowledges, is evident from the signification of Egypt in the proper sense as being external knowledge, consequently matters of external knowledges, and that the external knowledges signified in a good sense by Egypt are those of the Church. That this is the internal sense of these words is plain not only from the signification of the word earth or land when the land of Egypt is not meant, and from that of Egypt in the proper sense, and from its being said, all the earth came in the plural, but also from the very connection of things in the internal sense. For in this connection it now follows that the truths and goods of remains are brought together into external knowledges. For the case is this: during man's regeneration as to the natural, goods and truths are one and all brought together into external knowledges. Those which are not in the external knowledges there are not in the natural. For the natural mind, as regards that part of it which is subject to the understanding, consists solely of external knowledges. The external knowledges that belong to the natural are the ultimates of order, and things prior must be in ultimates so as come into existence and to appear in that sphere. And besides this, all prior things tend to ultimates as to their boundaries or ends, and come into existence together therein as causes do in their effects, or as higher things do in lower, as in their vessels. The external knowledges of the natural are such ultimates. Hence it is that the spiritual world is terminated in man's natural, in which the things of the spiritual world are symbolically represented. Unless spiritual things were symbolically represented in the natural, that is, by such things as are in the world, they would not be understood at all. All this shows that during the regeneration of the natural, all interior truths and goods which are from the spiritual world are brought into external knowledges in order that they may appear. Number 5374. To buy. This signifies appropriation therefrom, as is evident from the signification of to buy, namely to procure for oneself, thus to appropriate. Procuring and appropriating spiritually are effected by means of good and truth. To this corresponds the procuring and appropriating that in the world are effected by means of silver and gold. For in the spiritual sense, silver is truth and gold is good. Hence, buying signifies appropriation, as also in the following passages in the Word. Every one that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no silver, come ye buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk without silver and without price. In Matthew, the kingdom of the heavens is like unto treasure hid in the field, which when a man hath found, he hideth, and in his joy he goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Again, the kingdom of the heavens is like unto a merchantman seeking goodly pearls. And he went and sold all that he had, and bought it. Again, the prudent virgin said to the foolish ones, Go ye to them that sell, and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came. As buying signifies appropriation, therefore in the word the things bought with silver are clearly distinguished from those otherwise obtained. Moreover, the slaves bought with silver were as one's own, and in a lower degree like those born in the house, and therefore they are often mentioned together, as in Genesis. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy silver, must needs be circumcised. And in Leviticus, if a priest buy any soul with the purchase of silver, he and one that is born in his house, they shall eat of his bread. Hence is evident what in the word is signified by the redeemed of Jehovah, namely those who have received good and truth, and thus those to whom the things of the Lord have been appropriated. Number 5375. To Joseph. This signifies where the celestial of the spiritual was, as is evident from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, as often shown above. The celestial of the spiritual is the good of truth from the divine.